If you're familiar with Bangalore traffic, then you'll know how bad Silk Board Junction is. The other day, I had to pass through Silk Board, and Google Maps suggested a shorter route to my destination. I gladly opted to take this route. While the distance was short, what Google Maps didn't tell me was how narrow the lanes were, full of potholes. It was difficult even for a bike to navigate, let alone a car. Your journey with compound interest in stock markets is somewhat similar. Let me explain. We consider compound interest as the eighth wonder of the world, and we refer to it in almost all conversations related to stock markets. I've done this as well. And when we talk about compound interest, there is a great deal of generalization and oversimplification, which often sets the wrong expectation with newbie investors. Firstly, for those of you who are not aware, compound interest is the interest you earn over the principal and interest accrued over the previous period. In simplistic form, we say this is interest on interest. Over a long tenure or passage of time, interest on interest accumulates and you create wealth. Let's say you invest ₹100 in an FD that offers you 20% interest. I understand 20% is an exaggeration, but for the sake of this video, let's assume your bank is generous enough to give you that interest. Now, because the interest rate is attractive, you decide to stay invested in it for 10 years. Here is how your ₹100 investment in this FD grows. Do you notice the nice upward sloping curve here? At the start of the curve, the pace at which your money grows is slow and steady. But with passage of time, the speed at which money accumulates increases. This is the compounding effect that people talk about. In this example, it took almost 6 years for ₹100 to become ₹300. However, the next ₹300 was generated in just over 4 years. The longer you stay invested, the more wealth is created, and that's how compounding works. I promise I won't bore you with too much math. Not that I like it, but this one is important to know. The compound interest formula is something like this. If you know 3 things, that is the value at the beginning, the value at the end, and the time period, then you can calculate something called as the compounded annual growth rate, or the CAGR. So in the FD example that I just spoke about, if I plug all these values in the formula, then I get CAGR as 20%, which is what I stated right at the beginning. Alright, now let's keep this in mind and shift our focus to stock markets. 10 years ago, Mahindra & Mahindra was trading at ₹600 per share, but today it's roughly trading around ₹3,000. We know the beginning value, we know the ending value, and we also know the time period. If we plug these values in the compound interest formula, we get the CAGR as 18%. People will pick examples like this and conclude that compound interest works in stock markets. After all, this is very similar to the 20% FD example we just spoke about. The problem, however, is what you experience when you invest in an FD versus what you experience as an investor when you invest in a stock. In the FD example, the curve was smooth, non-bumpy, and very predictable. It was predictable because 20% was fixed or guaranteed by your bank. We knew that the growth rate would be 20% even before we made the investment. But in the case of your investment journey in a stock, there are a lot of unknown factors. The growth rate is unpredictable. The journey could be rough and bumpy. There could be instances where your investment can go below your investment value. There could be sleepless nights. And all thanks to the volatility in the stock. Yes, the growth rate or the CAGR in the Mahindra & Mahindra example was 18%. But we get to know this only in hindsight, and there is zero predictability of returns here. And you experience this 18% CAGR only if you endured the pain inflicted by volatility and stayed through the journey. This, as you can imagine, is a very different experience in comparison to the compounding offered by a fixed deposit. So when someone tells you that compounding works in stock markets, you also need to complete that by giving them a full picture of the journey. Your returns need not be staggered throughout your investment journey, but instead come in just one shot, and you really can't time this. Finally, there is zero predictability of returns. So therefore, comparing how compounding works in FD and expecting the same in stock markets is highly flawed. Does that mean compounding just doesn't work in stock markets? That's the point. While the end result is the same, the journey is very different, which is what makes all the difference. I hope you found this video useful. If you've experienced compounding in any particular stock, do share your journey with us.